Hello, everybody. Uh, this is DC. Welcome to my new project that I'm working on, which I call the Dcpc, or DC's Political Corner. Um, I happen to want to talk about a bunch of cool, well, things that I think are cool. I'm as somebody who's studied history and politics and just like the weird sort of world that we live in, I kind of wanted to do something about it. Uh, so as you can see, um, so the way that this show is going to kind of work out is we're going to talk about the news of the day or week or what have you, and then we'll go into our various topics. This week, we'll be talking about Middle Eastern mega projects, including Saudi Arabia's NEOM and the new Cairo capital that they're building. And then maybe we'll get into some Dubai stuff if there's time. But what I'm going to do is just mainly talk about stuff. We'll watch some videos from other creators who I watch and who I would recommend if you're more interested in the topics. Um, yeah, yeah. Tyler Nocturne. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dubai's got some crazy stuff. The Burj Khalifa. Uh, Recently they had a once in a lifetime monsoon. And it's a desert Gulf state, so they don't really get much rain, and they finally did, and it just like washed everything away. There were like rivers running through the streets. Uh, yeah, it was pretty bad. Uh, but anyways, we're going to yeah. Uh, yeah. So cool. Um, yeah. So I think I'm just gonna start with our first topics of the day. The RNC is currently going on. Um, they've had some very interesting speakers, including Amber Rose, um, which I was surprised to see up on that stage. She's a media personality as well as I believe a rapper, and was once in a relationship with Kanye West, where she said that she put a pinky in his butt. So, you know, that's cool. Didn't realize that she was a conservative. Um, yeah. Uh, Trump is got yeah. Uh, yeah, and Trump got nominated. He is now the official Republican candidate for president. He made an appearance yesterday after the assassination attempt over the weekend. He came in. He had a bandage over his ear. Uh, Everybody cheered. They were singing "I'm proud to be an American" as he was walking on. Yeah, he was. I mean, it's just like it's all very interesting what's happening. Uh, Trump, the Trump VP dropped. Uh, yeah, this week is not gone how I expected either. The Trump VP dropped. They have chosen negative charisma JD Vance. We're gonna start off with a video by the Wall Street Journal about him, because he is an interesting character, as somebody who He grew up in Appalachia, Ohio, on the Kentucky border. He wrote a book about it. He went to Yale. He became a Peter Thiel blood boy. Peter Thiel, yeah. Oh, I wish it was that J.D. Vance. No, this guy's much worse. He's a class trader. He's a venture capitalist. He believes that there are no systemic issues, especially in Appalachia. It's all you can get out of poverty. You can get out of drug addiction through pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, by doing a Sigma grind set, right? You just gotta hustle harder, and then you'll get out of poverty, just like he did. No, wait. He got out of poverty through government programs. He joined the Marines, which is the military is a government works program. Their output is, the destruction of the third world, but, they're a jobs program nonetheless. We don't have any, in America, we don't have any civil service, that you can join. It's either you join the military or that's it. Right? Yeah, you could do all of these other charitable programs, nonprofits and stuff like Habitat for Humanity, all of that. They're all private charities and private NGOs. They're not part of the government. Anyways, I could go on, but let's hear a little bit about J.D. Vance. Who is he? Yep, he is a real guy. Okay, let me...
And became a Ron Howard directed movie in 2020.
I know.
All right, how about
I could
now?
have done better. But you got to decide. You want to be somebody or not?
We're trying to paint this white nationalist movement as a movement primarily of poor and working class Americans, when the truth is that the alt-right is actually led by better educated and frankly pretty well-to-do people.
In his initial foray into the public spotlight, Vance was very much anti-Trump. His book made clear that he was a conservative. Many people latched onto it as an explanation for Trump's sort of surprise success in the Republican Party and then in the election.
When Vance launched his campaign for the Senate in 2021, his stance on Trump underwent a big shift.
I obviously didn't fully appreciate the president's appeal in 2016.
Yeah, he said some bad things about me, but that was before he knew me, and then he fell in love.
He even described himself to me in one interview as a flip-flop flipper on Trump, saying that he had similar policy views but was against Trump as a person until he realized that Trump was advocating for the policies that he supported.
While running for Senate, Vance was one of several pro-Trump candidates in the primary. But in one debate, Vance was the lone candidate to oppose a NATO-enforced no-fly zone over Ukraine, and that caught the eye of Trump's inner circle.
What a no-fly zone, it sounds nice, like we asked the Russians not to fly planes over Ukraine. What it means in practice is American Marine Corps pilots, Air Force pilots, and Navy pilots getting in dogfights with Russian jets, which the problem with that is it's not in our vital national interest.
That impressed Donald Trump Jr., and he began advocating for Vance's candidacy, including with his father.
Trump's unique brand of conservative politics has been reshaping the core tenets of the Republican Party since he was elected in 2016, like tighter borders and a retreat from the world stage. He's changed the GOP so much that the Republican National Committee recently revamped its platform to a new, stripped-down version, one that focuses more on Trump himself than on specific policy decisions.
Trump has been changing all of those stances to the point where many older Republicans feel it's no longer recognizable. At the same time, a movement has arisen in Trump's image that believes in his policies and believes that the Republican Party should be reshaped in his image.
Believers in this movement, referred to as the New Right or National Conservatives, take Trump's impulses and turn them into doctrine. Vance has become one of their leading voices.
The American people, again, they need people who put the interests of their own citizens first, of our own citizens first. And that's what this entire movement is all about. And I think that's what the Trump presidency will be about if we give him another shot, as I expect that we will.
When Trump selected Mike Pence to be his running mate, that was a pick very much intended to reassure Republican voters. Pence, being a traditional conservative, an evangelical Christian, was someone who regular Republicans who saw Trump as sort of an arriviste in their party could look at Pence and say, all right, that's someone I can trust. Fast forward to 2024, it's clear that Trump no longer sees a need to share power with that wing of the Republican Party.
Right after Trump's attempted assassination in July, Vance was one of the first Republicans to publicly cast blame at the Biden campaign for the shooting.
Are Pence and Putin still dating? That I'm not sure of. I think, actually, I don't think so because Pence isn't allowed to talk to any woman without his wife present, and so I don't know if his wife would be okay with him dating. But yeah, it just, so when Trump started, he needed the backing of the Conservative Party, in order, so he chose the most white bread conservative evangelical in the party, and that was Mike Pence. But now he just doesn't need that anymore because he has such a big base. You know, the whole MAGA party is different from the traditional conservatives. They don't. Trump has created a cult of personality. Why did they choose? Yeah. So there were a couple options. Marco Rubio from Florida, as well as Burgum, who's the governor of North Dakota. I think they chose Vance because he's sort of like he'll just do whatever Trump wants. He's an empty vessel. He doesn't, like, he's willing to betray his own. He's willing to, like, change his stance. Like, this man did not like Trump. He was a never Trumper, but so were so many other Republicans. And then Trump won, and they jumped all on the train, and they knew that if they sucked up to him, if they kissed his feet, that they would get positions, that they would get power. That's how you have people like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. These people rode the Trump train, and it got them to a very, very good place. And so I think that's J.D. Vance is there too. And I think the funny thing is he's only been a senator for less than a year. he doesn't have that experience. Yeah, he's very, very new. Like, I believe Obama, before he started running for president, had served a term as a senator. And before then, he had served in various capacities in Chicago. But Vance is from the venture capitalists. He's a Silicon Valley guy. And so it's an interesting pick. Yeah, that it's still like, I don't know why you would go with him. He's also young. He's in his late 30s. I think he's 37, something like that. He's a very young candidate. And so it's interesting that they picked him. Yeah.
As Republicans unite around the Trump-Vance ticket after the July 13th attack, Democrats remain in disarray following President Biden's disastrous debate performance in June. Biden has vowed to stay in the race despite continuing calls from fellow Democrats to step away from his place at the top of the ticket.
I think there's a whole pool of voters there in the center of the electorate who really are not being spoken to by either candidate because of the way these tickets have shaped up.
Senators Marco Rubio from Florida and Tim Scott from South Carolina were also contenders on Trump's VP shortlist. Both could have appealed more to minority voters, something that Trump has historically struggled with. Choosing Vance allows Trump to shore up support among the white working.
Yeah, so Tim Scott was also a contendant. He's a black Republican from South Carolina. And there's like an obvious reason why they didn't pick him. And a spoiler alert, it's racism. And I guess Marco Rubio's just not as popular, but J.D. Vance barely won his senatorial seat. It was only, he was losing for pretty much the entire race up until he was nominated by Trump. And I think that's the reason why he changed his attitude. Because Trump got him the bump in Ohio, and that's how he won. He only won by, I think it was a couple million maybe votes. Let me see. Let's do the J.D. Vance senatorial race. Yeah. So this is it. He only won 43%. Yeah, he only won by like 200,000 votes. And so he really needed that. He really needed that Trump boost.
Class.
Ohio is also part of the Rust Belt, and the most crucial states in this election are those Rust Belt states. That white working class vote is a vote that is also very crucial throughout those Rust Belt battlegrounds. There is a hope by some of Vance's backers and some on Trump's team that he could potentially galvanize those voters even more than Trump already does to juice Republican turnout in those states.
What was the Russia collusion hoax? It was about destroying Donald Trump. This ridiculous New York fraud case, it's about destroying the guy's wealth before he re-enters the Oval Office.
Good. It's good to see you, man. Thank you.
He is really a bet on the future as well, a bet on the future of the Republican Party and a bet on the future of the populist conservative movement. Trump would never say he's anointing a successor, but Vance was decades younger than the other potential picks that were under consideration for vice president. And in choosing such a young person to be on the ticket with him, there's an unavoidable implication that Trump has sort of chosen an heir, chosen someone to take the mantle of that MAGA movement and go forward with it, whether it's as a future president himself or simply as someone who is poised to exert great influence in the Republican Party, continuing to shape it along those populist conservative lines for years or potentially decades to come.
Yeah, so you get this guy. We got J.D. Vance with Trump. And, I don't know. Yeah, he's a he's an interesting character. And, I mean, the thing of the Republicans, what they just need to unify, and they kind of have that with Project 2025. That is the Republican agenda, and that's something that the Democrats are lacking, which is a unified agenda. They can't get everybody to agree in the Green New Deal. They can't get everybody to agree on anything. And then there's all this infighting. And now there's chaos after the debate, after just Biden in general just being stubborn. He just will not concede. He's just like, no, I'm going to win. There's no way around it. Despite the fact that, he's up there in age. Like, I mean, the age thing is one thing, but we've had old presidents. Like, it's not, but he's going to be 86 by the time he's done. And it's just like, and it seems like he doesn't. So it seems at this moment, Biden is still running. The DNC has not happened, and that's when they determine who the candidate will be. And that is going to be interesting. And the obvious pick is Kamala. She's the vice president. And whoever was going to vote for Joe is going to vote for Kamala no matter what, right? Like, if you're going to vote for the Democratic ticket, it doesn't, Kamala looks better. She might actually get more votes because people don't want to vote for Joe Biden. Now, her policies are similar. Her policies on immigration aren't good. She's, her, like, she was a cop. She was a lawyer. Like, I mean, really, like, she is the best I mean, I don't know who else would. I mean, you could maybe like a Hakeem Jeffries, but he just got to his position. I mean, the obvious pick was Bernie, but he doesn't want to, and that makes sense. Yeah, who Kamala would have as vice president is an interesting, is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of directions. They're probably going to go with a white governor. So you have Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, which that would make sense, seeing as how Kamala's also from California. Although I don't know if they would want to pick two bicoastal elitists. But they're probably going to go with another white governor if Kamala takes the place. Now, because we are living in a funny world where this could be Veep. Like, the real world could become Veep. Those of you who haven't Veep is a show on HBO where, what's her name? Julia Louis-Dreyfus, the woman from Seinfeld. She plays the vice president, and it's like her cabinet, right? Well, later on in the show, the president, who you don't really see, he drops, and she becomes president right before the election, which is something that could definitely happen. And a lot of people who are just, most people are like, Joe shouldn't be the candidate. But then there are a bunch of people within that who are like, Joe should retire now, let Kamala be president, and then she'll be the front runner. But we'll see. Dude's still stubborn as ever. All right. Yeah, that's the best option. I mean, granted, there's a lot of things Biden could do to turn everybody around, right? If he changes his view on Israel, Gaza, if he's like, no more weapons, he instantly will get a bunch of votes. People will turn around. It's because of his policies. It's because of his unwillingness to back down. It's because of his past too. He's he's not a very good guy. He was instrumental in the crime bill, in NAFTA, in a bunch of stuff that you can see to the downfall of America. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's the thing. I'm not voting for him at this moment. I mean, I'm still gonna vote, but just not for the top ticket, because it's. Cause I mean, I don't support his view on Israel. I don't like that he's still sending them money. I don't like that he's still sending them weapons when they are, and that because I pay taxes, because I live in America, I'm now complicit in a genocide. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Alrighty. Well, now that we've gotten the first part, the intro out of the way, let's get into the meat of why we're all here. We are gonna talk about some mega projects. First, we're gonna start out with NEOM. I'm gonna put a few facts up in front just to have an understanding of it, and then we'll watch some videos about it, because other people can better explain it than I can. I'm an idiot. I just happened to find this stuff interesting and wanted to put it all together. So let's talk about NEOM. So it was launched in 2017 by MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, who's the crown prince of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He is pretty much the de facto ruler. His father is the king, but he pretty much has control over the country's finances, and yeah, so he's the architect of this project. Total planned area is 26,500 kilometers squared, or for Americans, two 289,870 807 football fields. So that's a lot of area. There's going to be a floating industrial complex, like a floating pier, a ski resort. I know, right? In the middle of the desert. Anyway, artificial islands for tourists, and a renewable powered city called The Line. And you can see it on the map. Yeah. Yeah, it's like 100 something miles long by like 600 feet wide. It's just a line that goes, and it's supposed to be renewable. No cars, no anything. Yeah. Yeah, there's going to also be airport. So the Saudis, most of their money comes from oil. They recently wanted to move away from oil and move towards other ways to make money. They have a huge sovereign wealth fund, which they are using to invest in others, in other capacities. One of them is they want to increase tourism, which, I mean, being the site of the holiest site in Islam, they do get a lot of tourists, but they're almost entirely Muslim. Now, what they mean by tourism is they want, yeah, it does sound awesome in theory, but also I think Dubai might have like an indoor one. It might just be, I think it's just like one slope, but still, yes. But I think they want to do this outside. There's also no water, so they have to import a whole bunch of fresh water, and they're going to build a reserve for it. We'll see in a couple of the videos. But yeah, so Saudi Arabia is looking to divest from oil, and so they have a bunch of these projects. And MBS, they're an autocratic regime. Can't really, nobody's really telling him what projects to do. He just wants to do this. And he can because he's in control of trillions of dollars of money. And so, yeah. And so, this whole project is going to cost $1.5 to $2 trillion. Which, I mean, and not to mention, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. They've also, they bought interest into golf, into the PGA, and so they're having their own tournaments. They have WWE in Saudi Arabia. They have, so they're trying to get Western tourists into Saudi Arabia because that's where they see a lot of the money. And so that's what they're doing with all of these mega projects. All right. Well, so we have a video sent out by NEOM of the Line, which is this long city, and the Mount Troy Jenna, which is, I believe, the ski resort. So we'll we'll take a look at those. So this is the line.
I see trees of green, red was true, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. What a wonderful world.
Okay. So really what the chief product coming out of Saudi Arabia is not these mega projects, but in fact CGI 3D renderings of architectural products. Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, they have enough money to run the highest end PCs that you can imagine. But yeah, it's supposed to be this like place full of green, and you know, it's like there's tons of parks and water, and you know, everything's whatever. It just looks very, very, very silly. And like it looks dystopian. It looks like because you are trapped inside of a building, right? And so it's like you're living in like a spaceship, like a space station, like in a sci-fi movie or a TV series, with like no windows. I don't see anything wrong with that. All right. Here's Trillion.
Journey to new heights. A unique global destination driven by cutting-edge technology in NEOM. This is Trillion. Breathtaking architecture and innovative engineering fold seamlessly into the natural landscape. Ascend to a vertical village, a portal connecting the digital and the physical. The seasonal climate provides a multitude of high-altitude adventures in the Arabian Peninsula with the region's first outdoor ski experience. Enjoy the buzz of world-class entertainment, the crisp mountain air, and the world's most advanced health and well-being center nourish both body and soul. And as night falls, you can witness the stars as you've never seen them before. Welcome to Trillion, the mountains of NEOM.
Yes. Again, while these do look dope, it's very silly. Because you have to see they have to build a giant reservoir just to accommodate the like snowfall. I think where is it? It's right here. Yeah. So you have to have, because there's no water in this area. I think it's particularly dry for a very dry country. Yeah. There's no like practicality to any of this. And again, it's all just like, it's cool. Yeah, this is cool. This is a cool 3D rendering. Some CGI 3D animation studio probably made a lot of money off of this. But it's just not practical. Yeah. So that is the two biggest parts of this project. Now we're going to hear from someone who I watch a lot, Adam something. He's going to talk about NEOM. Yeah, they do.
So in case you've been living under a rock for the past month, the Saudi government has officially announced NEOM, an ultra-high-tech region of the future, made up of Trojana, an LSD user's idea of a mountain resort, the Oxagon, the floating surveillance dystopia, and of course, the Line, the futuristic line-shaped city cutting straight through the landscape. And we're going to take a look at them now. First, Trojana, which is a mountain resort on crack, complete with a huge concrete artificial lake, some bizarre mirror cave, a portal connecting the digital and the physical, a vertical village where people are transported by balls, some ultra-luxury housing, and the world's most advanced healthcare and well-being center to nourish both body and soul. Now, believe it or not, this is the least stupid part of NEOM and is generally feasible if we leave out all the bizarre shapes. But as soon as the Saudi dictator wants something more complicated than a mountain resort, things start going downhill pretty fast. Enter the Oxagon, a chimera of seaport, high-tech industry and residential areas, half of it floating on the sea. 100% renewable energy, fully automated seaport, clean advanced manufacturing, research and innovation, buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. However,
this is a cognitive city that not only adapts to your needs, but will learn to anticipate them.
It's just a fancy way of saying you'll be under constant surveillance by the Saudi state. And I'm sorry, you are building in the open desert. You have virtually unlimited space at your disposal. Why is half of this thing floating on the sea, blocking the way to your commercial seaport? And now you also run the risk of...
Right, there's like no thought into any of this. It's just like, oh, it's cool. Let's build this right in the middle of the ocean. It's not like we have, an entire desert with nothing in it that we could just, what if we just tried to turn it green? What if we tried to turn the desert green? What if we tried to make it agricultural? What if we tried doing stuff that'll help, the people who live here? No, let's just build this cool octagon thing. Let's build a ski resort for the ultra wealthy. Let's build a long dystopian city that will one day be a Call of Duty map. Oh yeah, and we're gonna be watching it 24/7. Like, is that what people want? It's so silly.
A cargo ship ram into your city, not to mention the damage severe weather could do. Also, are you going to invent environmentally friendly cargo ships as well? Because those are some of the worst polluting vehicles on the planet. But the Oxagon still isn't the stupidest part of this project. That title goes to The Line. It's going to be so modern and futuristic that flying pods will take you to your beheading after the Saudi religious police deems you a blasphemer for sharing an article about women's rights. And, believe it or not, its current iteration is a vastly upscaled version of the original concept, which was basically 3 levels with some buildings around the pedestrian level. But they only got more ambitious with time, so now The Line is a 170-kilometer long, 500-meter tall, 200-meter wide mirror-plated skyscraper going through the desert. So what is wrong with this project? Well, what's not wrong with it? Let's take a look. The project itself has some surprisingly neat characteristics. You're always 5 minutes away from amenities, 2 minutes away from nature, and there are no cars or any other emission sources. Also, the whole project is set to be fully powered by renewable energy. And that's great, but they're trying to accomplish all this with a 170-kilometer long hollow skyscraper in the desert. There is a very good reason why we aren't building cities in a line shape, since you needlessly stretch everything out. So you can be 5 minutes away from amenities, but if the amenity you want is on the other end of NEOM, well, now you gotta travel up to 170 kilometers to get to it. Also, the reason why they insist on a line shape is because it's supposedly more compact and prevents sprawling, which is a problem in Saudi Arabia. But sprawling only happens because of cars. Cities that weren't built or bulldozed for cars are all compact and space efficient by nature. So they could have just built a car-free city, but that's not futuristic enough, so now we have The Line. In contrast, it was...
Right? Like, they don't even see it. Like, it's just like, that's what happens when you get urban sprawl, because you have highways which are, which require infrastructure. And especially, us in America being a car-dependent society, we have a lot of sprawl. You have a lot of empty areas underneath overpasses. It's just a lot. It takes a lot to create car-centric infrastructure. Where is GLaDOS? Very good question. Where is GLaDOS? It's and then so like, and they don't understand how, like, I don't know. It's just like basic infrastructure, basic urban design right? Like if you make something a line, and if you make, like, it's essentially like you take a two-dimensional object, like a city is spread out into, well, not three dimensions, or it's more spread out instead of, well, it's actually more like 1D versus 2D, right? So you have a city which is like a two-dimensional, like a square or something. And so it's easy to get from one point to one point. If it's just one dimension, you have to travel along that only one existing point. So, right, and it's 170 kilometers long. So if you live on one side and your friend lives on the other side, if you were in a normal city, that might be easier. They actually might not live as far away. Yeah, the trains is a very interesting thing. I don't know if Adam will talk about it, but there's another video I have which they talk about the like math needed for the trains. Supposedly they were going to have two I think they were maglev trains that would go one way, one would go the other. But you cannot have, like, they cannot move fast enough for what they want. Like, it would take a while to get from one side to the other. Because the space needed and the technology we have isn't there. Like, we do have not in America. There is high-speed rail. They can go like 350 kilometers. Yeah, that's also true. A number of stops, right? Nobody's going to take it from one side to the other. People live in the middle. So you would have to have stops there. And that adds time. And that means you can't move as fast because you have to take into account slowdown. So you need multiple trains. And the other way that people are going to get around were these like quadcopter taxis, which is just like, we all know we don't all know what a VTOL is, but like a helicopter is shaky enough. So, and like, it's just like, let's make a drone that can take people around. And that's not going to be noisy at all, because drones are noisy. You can hear them. Imagine a whole bunch of those just like buzzing around your head. It would be infuriating. I have a feeling that this is going to be just like Rapture City, or like BioShock. Like, next BioShock game is going to take place in the line.
Was a big cube, or better yet a cylinder. To achieve the 34 square kilometer footprint, instead of cutting through the landscape, you would only need a 3.3 kilometer radius structure. I don't know if the tub would feel as futuristic, but if they're all about efficiency, that's what they should be building. Not to mention, the tub would have less sides exposed to the elements, and you don't even need to drag out utilities for 170 kilometers, leading to better efficiency by an order of magnitude. But once again, that doesn't feel futuristic enough, so we have to do the stupid version that does.
Yeah, travel end to end in 20 minutes. That's not possible. We don't have the tech. China, which has, I think, the fastest high-speed rail, they travel safely at 350 kilometers. This is 170 kilometers long. It would still take 30 minutes. And that's not accompanying stops, and maybe they have an express end to end, which I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Like,
And the problem with these pre-planned monstrosities is they cannot account for population growth. They are inflexible. The line is supposed to have housing for up to 9 million people. What if the population tries to exceed that? Will there be a waiting list? In a regular city, you can either densify or build new districts. With the line, you're stuck within the dimensions of your mirror-plated desert tube. So if the population tries to outgrow the 9 million mark, things will become unaffordable pretty quickly. But if the population declines, you're going to have massive abandoned sections which you have to maintain nonetheless. You can't just disable or mothball them, because that would cut the line in two. Speaking of population, this whole futuristic space efficiency looks nice on renders, but it would basically entail living on top of each other in a confined space. The psychological effects of this would be severe, but at least this layout would make it easier to hide from the religious police. Aside from that, since we're building a city in 3D, everything also has to be accessible by low mobility groups. So we're looking at systems of elevators and escalators that take you up to 500 meters, multiplied along the entire length of 170 kilometers. To give you an idea of what this entails, the Empire State Building, which is as tall as NEOM, has to operate 73 elevators to move people around. But let's be charitable and say NEOM will only need 20 elevators for a given section. Let's also throw in 10 escalators for good measure. Suppose we have one of these elevator-escalator systems every 500 meters. That's 6,800 elevators and 3,400 escalators. Yeah. D vitamin deficiency is also going to be an issue. In order to get sunlight, you either have to live on the sunny side or go all the way up to the top. Otherwise, life inside NEOM would be rather depressing. You're locked inside a narrow tube full of buildings with prying eyes on you potentially from all directions at all times. If you want to catch a breather, you can always go outside though, into the open, empty desert. Or you can take NEOM's transportation system, which is just as smart and well thought out as the rest of the project. The planners, I mean CGI artists' idea of transportation inside the line is a metro line, a freight rail line, and some ultra-high-speed whatever running at the bottom all along its entire length. And this is stupid for a number of reasons. First, you have to build 170 kilometers of subway and underground freight rail, so basically 340 kilometers of double-track rail tunnels in total. And then, between those, some kind of techno-bullshit rapid transit that takes you from one end to the other in 20 minutes. So the thing would have to run at least at 510 kilometers per hour, not counting stops along the way. I've heard rumors they want a Hyperloop, you know, that thing Elon Musk admitted to be a scam to try to get California high-speed rail cancelled, but here a regular maglev would also be enough. Otherwise they would have pods, because of course they would, and also air taxis, which has to be the stupidest, most dangerous idea of all. Running a helicopter in a narrow, semi-enclosed space like that within close proximity of public areas and housing. So not only will you go deaf from the noise and blind from the rotor wash creating a tornado of trash and dust, you'd also get blown down into the chasm, if the thing doesn't crash into the walls first due to some erratic turbulence. So you would be using the subway for local transportation and the maglev for long distance. And this is a problem. Since we're going in a straight 170 kilometer long line, if there's any failure at any point, your system is immediately cut in half, not to mention necessary maintenance or overhauls. That would be complete chaos. This is what happens when you have a single transit line serving millions of people. Oh, you wanna ride the subway? Sorry, someone fell on the tracks 150 kilometers down, so now 5 million people are late from work. And if you need to get to the other end but the maglev breaks down, I hope you like traveling 200 stops on the subway for 5 hours, because that's what you're going to do. And these problems could easily be solved if the line was shaped like a regular city, not a fucking line in the desert.
Right. Yeah, it's just like, there's just so many issues with just building a straight line city, which is why there are no straight line cities. They're all built like circles. Because that's how you expand. Like, that's how we've expanded naturally. Since we started doing civilization, since we, you know, started making cities, we've just been building out because it's easier.
Speaking of, if you look at any city on a map, you'll notice one thing. It was either built next to a river or on the coast. Even cities like Medina that appear to be in the middle of nowhere are actually built on top of oases. As for the line's location, there is absolutely nothing there. It's an empty desert, meaning things like food and water would need to be shipped in from elsewhere and then taken along the entire 170 kilometer length of the line. And just how do they plan on going through that mountain range? Will they dig tunnels underneath? Will they excavate the mountain away? What if somewhere along the way the soil is unsuitable for a 500 meter skyscraper? Will the whole thing just sink into the sand then? And this whole fixation they have on space efficiency would be fair enough if they weren't trying to be space efficient out in the open desert where they have virtually limitless space to expand. Speaking of, there is a huge open area right where the line should end. If they really want to build the city of the future in the country of the medieval, they could just do it there. Well, actually, the area isn't completely empty. NEOM is planned to be built on top of the Al-Huwaita tribe's territory, so the Saudi government has already started harassing.
Right. There's also that, too, that in the area where they want to build these mega projects, people still live there. People live there. There are, tribal people that still live in the area. There are, minority groups that still live in the area. Like, these aren't empty deserts. Like, they're, you're along a coastline. Of course, you're going to have people along this coastline. It's sparsely populated, sure. But there are still people there. And what are you going to do with those people? Are you going to pay them to move? Are you going to bulldoze over them? Are you going to displace them? Yeah.
Forcefully displacing and abducting them. Thus, NEOM will stand on the surest foundation there is: genocide. But the line and NEOM as a whole in their current forms are just not happening. Here's why. On paper, the NEOM project will cost $500 billion. That might sound reasonable until you consider that the price includes a mountain resort complex with a mirror cave and an artificial lake, a half-floating city seaport complex, and a 500-meter tall, 170-kilometer-long skyscraper, including 340 kilometers of underground rail and 170 kilometers of maglev. For the sake of perspective, just the volume of the line is equivalent to about 6,000 Empire State Buildings, and just one Empire State Building cost $572 million in today's dollars. And the latter was a regular building, not some techno-magic hocus-pocus fever dream. Also, regular skyscrapers, as bad and pointless as they are, I have a video on that, have the advantage of being built on top of pre-existing city infrastructure. In the case of the line, you have to build out all the utilities and services from scratch, plus hundreds of kilometers of underground transit. All that is to say, NEOM isn't getting built out of $500 billion. By the Saudi dictator's own construction company, mind you. And how this project would be paying for itself is anyone's guess, really. But hey, Indian and Pakistani slave labor provides a great opportunity for cost savings. And there are many more problems I could list.
Right. So you have that problem too. Who's going to build it? Who's going to finance it? Who's paying for this? What labor are you using? Now it's Saudi Arabia. So, and they're okay with slave labor. They'll just import people from poorer areas. I mean, Qatar had the same issue with FIFA a couple of years ago, where they had literal camps full of people, whole slum areas full of people that they brought in as slave labor. They took away their passports, and now they just kind of live there. There's a lot of that goes on in the Gulf states, especially. Many people who live in these Gulf states don't have citizenship to those particular states. There's a lot of people, especially in the UAE. There's a lot of people. A very small percentage are have UAE citizenship. Most of the people who live there are migrants. And this is like it's also common in a lot of these places where you don't get citizenship automatically by being born there. So you have generations of people who may be ethnically, Pakistani or Indian or from, the African coast, like they're from Somalia or, Djibouti or something like that. But they've lived in, the UAE, Qatar for their entire lives. And so as it was their grandparents who came, but they're not citizens. they don't have citizenship because they've never been to their whatever their their family came from, and so they're kind of just stuck in wherever they are, forced to do menial labor for the entirety of their lives.
How would the line be cooled? How would they would combat airborne diseases in that large semi-enclosed space? What if a maglev slams into a structural element and the whole structure just starts dominoing? What about the constant wind stress that the structure would be subject to? How would water be provided for 9 million people in the desert, and so on? Of course, the overarching goal of this project is to create a trade artery between Saudi and Egypt, bypassing Israel, which is fine, but they could do this very easily without all the unsustainable techno bullshit. Want to build a mountain resort? Just build a goddamn mountain resort. Want to build a seaport? Just build a goddamn seaport. Want to build a sustainable, walkable, emission-free city? Just build one on the coast. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for thousands of years before cars took over our streets. And this is the tragedy of dictators. They can only think in terms of megalomaniacal bullshit projects only to serve their egos and provide huge handouts for themselves and their cronies. The biggest
So we're going to talk about this guy as well. He's the president of Egypt, and is the topic of the second part of our mega project talk.
shinier the project, the bigger the ego, and the bigger the handouts. That's the reason why smooth brain dictator plus construction project equals dumb shit. And NEOM is just the latest, biggest, shiniest, dumbest example of that. Oh, and by the way, if I disappear after this video, please have the authorities treat it as a murder. Thanks.
Yeah, so that is NEOM. Yeah, so a couple other videos about let's see, let's go to mega projects.
2 years ago, We Are Mega Projects made a video. Our subject, a new, ambitious, and perhaps somewhat harebrained idea that had emerged out of Saudi Arabia. That country's leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and his allies had cooked up a vision for a planned city. Its name was to be NEOM, and it was to rival the great global cities of the world in its scale, while blowing them all away when it came to technology, innovation, and just sheer ingenuity. It was to be a powerhouse in every way conceivable, a generational accomplishment in human development, a new wonder of the world, and the critical achievement that would turn both Saudi Arabia and its crown prince into heroes that would guide humanity through the 21st century. Now, it's 2 years later, and the reality is anything but. The blind ambition that was going to build NEOM has instead been frustrated. The adoring world public has since started laughing, and the vast stretch of desert where this whole apparatus was supposed to come online in just a few months' time now sits all but empty, cleared of its humanity and its potential in order to serve a vision that may never be realized.
So what's funny is they're trying to build this like renewable, energy efficient, carbon neutral city. But in order to build that, you need to see all of the trucks, all of the dirt, all of the supplies, all of the infrastructure, everything that needs to be brought in to make this city energy efficient is a huge resource drain. So even if this does get built, and even if it is the efficient project that they say it's going to be, they've already doubled, tripled, quadrupled, tenfolded the amount of pollutants just to build the damn thing. They're never going to get a return on that, investment of resources. in terms of like how they're supposed to build an efficient city. If you want to build an efficient city, you should build it efficiently. You shouldn't. Okay. There's also another thing that I don't know if they're going to talk about. Somebody talked about the line it's built in it's a a giant wall. There are migratory birds that this city would be in the path of. So not only do you have to hear buzzing and of the drones overhead, just the rumbles of a city. You're also going to hear, if you lived on the walls, thump, 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 as thousands, millions of birds are going to hit this thing because it looks like a mirror. All right? We all know what happens. Birds in glass, right? When I was in elementary school, we had glass windows. You would always see them. You'd sometimes see them. They would just hit the walls. And you would just have dead birds everywhere. So we had to we made scarecrow projects. We would paint little scarecrows and stuff, put them on the windows so that the birds wouldn't hit them. So you got to also worry about that. It's also an ecological disaster.
And its potential in order to serve a vision that may never be realized. This is the story of NEOM, an idea that was supposed to change everything, and this is also the story of NEOM, one of the most spectacular failures of human engineering this side of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, this guy's good to a mega project.
Just before we continue with today's video, let me ask a question. Ever feel like you're online and you're like, oh no, my ISP is definitely watching what I'm doing. They're selling my data to big corporations, because that apparently is, with today's activity buggers, they not going to go end over American repo. If our...
Alright, there we go.
Now look, before we can get into the weeds on what exactly went wrong with NEOM, we're going to take a few moments to explore what this place was supposed to be. And yes, we've already done a prior episode on this monstrosity, but we're going to dive into it here again for two reasons. First, watch time, and second, the ambitions surrounding NEOM have gotten a lot bigger since that first time we covered the project. Named as a portmanteau of the ancient Greek prefix neo, meaning new, and the Arabic word for future, mustakabal, NEOM was intended to be just that, an ultra-futuristic city that promised improvements on every aspect of the cities that we less enlightened humans call home. The heart of the grand NEOM project today is the same that it's always been, the line, a concept for a planned city spread out over a linear stretch of land 170 kilometers or 110 miles.
Okay. So this isn't related to the line. But do you see where they're building this mega project? It's in the Gulf of Aqaba. And you heard that they're building a port, building all of this stuff. Do you see who's at the end of the Gulf of Aqaba? Israel. Right? So, it's definitely possible that they're building this to either compete with them or cooperate, because as of lately, the Saudi government has improved relations with Israel. Because who do we have in common? Who do they have in common? Who's providing them with weapons, each one of them, to fight their various civil wars and proxy wars? That's right, the United States of America. Thanks to us and the states that we help build, we might actually see Middle Eastern relations improve, albeit not. I mean, you have you have an autocratic regime in Saudi Arabia, and you have a fascist regime in Israel. And so so things are good. it could also be that they're just trying to compete with each other, which is definitely possible. But who knows? There's a whole bunch of geopolitics going on as well.
Long by just 200 meters or 660 feet wide. For some perspective here, that's long enough to stretch from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast anywhere in the nation of Panama, but not wide enough to hold a 10,000-seat football stadium. It was envisioned as a city without cars, without roads, where everything you'd need over the course of your...
Right. You can't even have, like, places with large gatherings. Like you mentioned, 10,000 person stadium. You can't have these sort of big events. There's not enough room. And if you do, you have to build it long, which doesn't really make sense if you want a football pitch or if you want a golf course. I mean, there won't be a golf course here anyways. Golf courses are immensely inefficient. But that's a whole different story. So, like, you can't even have, like, big entertainment, big sports events and stuff. So, like, that's a whole nother thing that they're excluding that makes, like, urban life worth living.
Daily life, be it occupational, educational, recreational, or otherwise, was just a brisk 5-minute walk away. Organized around a high-speed train that could take residents from one tip of Neom to the other in just 20 minutes, the city would be monitored constantly by a predictive AI that would use sophisticated technologies to ensure that everything inside Neom was going according to plan. Or at least that was the plan last time we put out a video on this subject, but we're pleased to report that just 4 months after that first episode came out, Saudi Arabia announced a revision. From then on, the line wasn't actually going to be individual buildings at all, but instead one single continuous building stretching the entire 170-kilometer length of the line. On the outside, it would be encased in an entirely glass-mirrored exterior with the capacity to house 9 million residents. It would be a continuous skyscraper, rising high enough that the Empire State Building could not hope to compare. That megabuilding would keep the same general idea as the line had started with, where communities would be arranged in such a way that all the basic services you could ever need would be within 5 minutes walking distance. Of course, building a 170-kilometer long glass-encased structure comes with quite a few technical challenges, especially when you add in the effects of the blazing hot Saudi sun. But that was nothing that the great minds of the project couldn't handle. Beyond just the line, Saudi Arabia would have built a second New Age monstrosity, this one bearing the name of Oxagon, intended to be a massive industrial complex situated conveniently between the line and the Suez Canal. The 8-sided Oxagon hub would have integrated an existing seaside port into a fast-growing development. Oxagon's most touted features included its integrated distribution systems, its net zero carbon emissions, its completely automated port, and its new record as the world's largest floating structure. Like the line, it was meant to be walkable, and when people needed to come by land from elsewhere in Saudi Arabia, they'd do so with hydrogen-powered means of transport. Its deeper details were a mess of 2021-era buzzwords, from the Internet of Things to machine learning and more, all focused toward creating a center of industrial innovation that could, of course, become a new global leader. And even that still wouldn't be enough for Neom. Since the publication of our original episode on the project, a whole range of new promises have come from the Saudi government, all with fancy names and concept art to go with them. Trojena is supposed to be a massive winter destination just 50 miles from the sea, featuring alpine and adventure sports. Sindalo is promised as a high-end island vacation hotspot with over 150 mooring points for the world's most luxurious super yachts. Epicon will allegedly include an ultra-luxury hotel with an architecture that simply must be seen in order to be believed, with the intent of attracting, quote, free thinkers and free spirits. Utamo is a, quote, theatre of the future carved inside of a mountain. Aquelum is advertised as, quote, a subterranean digitalized community of the future, while Ghidoria, community apparently intended just for golfers, will feature 190 glass-encased apartments hanging on the underside of a massive arch, for some reason. And even
it's just like they're just building stuff for the ultra wealthy. like there's nothing in mind for the urban sprawl for anyone. But that does bring up a good point. Where the workers going to live? Right? Where are those, right? You have these mega yacht islands, you have all of this stuff that needs, variety of different non-wealthy people, or you need all sorts of skilled labor, you need all sorts of engineers, like you got busboy, right? Like every facet will need to be there. Will you have housing for them? Are you just gonna slip together some shacks for them to live in? Are they going to be living in the upside-down glass apartments, too? Or is it just for those who can pay for it? There's really just no thought put into this at all. And the thing about autocratic regimes and these mega projects, nobody's going to tell you no. Nobody's going to be like, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about this? No, it's just, MBS calls up his 3D animation guys. It's just like, hey, can you make this like cool 3D concept for the city? And they're like, yeah, sure. And they do it. And then he's like, and then they call and be like, we didn't think this was going to be a real thing, right? Like, you just wanted some 3D mock-ups. Like, all of the other crypto bros want. Like, didn't expect this to become anything. We didn't think you were serious. Or at least that's the hope. I mean, they probably didn't say that.
That is not the end of what Saudi Arabia has envisioned for NEOM. It was going to get air taxis that would ferry people across the whole NEOM complex, with operational air taxis supposed to be flying by 2024. NEOM was supposed to be covered in a heavy veil of quantum cybersecurity in order to defend against cyber attacks. It was to be surrounded by lush fields of crops, growing all that was needed to sustain the people living on the line and elsewhere. NEOM was going to rely on cloud seeding to deliver consistent rainfall. It would feature a Jurassic Park-style attraction with gigantic robot dinosaurs.
Okay, so the cloud seeding thing is definitely possible. Weather manipulation has been something that we've been able to do for several decades. We did so in the Vietnam War. We did so to extend the monsoon season so that the Viet Cong would not continue to clap our butt cheeks. So jets would fly in the air, make it rain more, and so extending monsoon season so that less U.S. servicemen would die. Now, that's considered illegal in the U.S. You're not allowed to manipulate the weather at all in the U.S. It might be, I'm not sure if there's a UN resolution about it as well, but at least here in the U.S. you're not allowed to manipulate the weather, but it's something that could definitely be done. That's one of the more plausible things about this project, but it's also like, if you can do that, if you can do cloud seeding, why not just make the desert green? Why just focus specifically on these dumb mega projects? Like, you could feed more people. You'd attract more people if look, we turned the desert green. Look at what they did in Libya. That's what Gaddafi did. I mean, say what you will about Israel, they did that as well, albeit on top of the bones of the Palestinians that they expelled. But yeah. So it's possible. It's just like, you could do this, but for a better reason.
include a space to have robot cage matches, and the sand on its beaches would glow in the dark. There was even supposed to be a giant artificial glowing moon in the sky because humanity's current moon was apparently just not innovative enough or something. Perhaps it shouldn't be a surprise that the plan has drawn skeptics as well as supporters, many with insight into what it would take to produce something of NEOM's scale and ambition, and they pointed out that there's really not much evidence to suggest that Saudi Arabia could make this happen, while any other nation, architectural firm or engineering corporation would agree that it's not feasible. To put it simply, the technical challenges that stand between Mohammed bin Salman and a fully completed NEOM are not the sort of problems that get solved with a go-getter attitude and some self-belief. But over the past several years, as Saudi Arabia inserts itself into sports from golf and football to mixed martial arts and boxing and continues to heighten its geopolitical powers and increase its leverage across the world, it's kept just as clear of a focus on NEOM. After a years-long stream of glitzy promotional videos, new concept art, and announcements of new aspects to this rapidly evolving vision, it's become clear as day. NEOM is the centerpiece to it all, the great experiment by which Saudi Arabia's entire venture into the 21st century shall be judged. So, how's it going? Well, actually, it's going pretty badly. It's difficult to point to an initial cause for concern around NEOM, seeing as there's a good argument to be made that the entire thing is cause for concern. But the report that really hit NEOM where it hurts is one that came out on April the 5th of this very year, 2024. The report came by way of Bloomberg News, or one of the world's leading voices when it comes to reports about what the world's crazy rich oil and technology barons are up to, and the information it contained was stunningly bad. According to the report, anonymous figures in the know in Saudi Arabia had reported that the plan to have a partially built line rising up of the ground by 2030, home to 1.5 million residents at that time, had been revised sharply downward. Current expectations on the resident count in NEOM by 2030 have decreased to 300,000, a mere 1/5 of the prior figure. By that time, the line, still allegedly intended to stretch 170 kilometers by the time.
So they want to have the first part of it done 2030. 6 years. Now, let me see, how long did the Empire State Building take to build? Since that's what they're using as the comparison. Bill, okay. It only took a year. Okay. It only took a year to build. But when you... So, it took a year to build the Empire State Building. How about, let's look at another one. The Big Dig. In order to build the infrastructure for Boston, which was our own mega project, 1991 to 2006, to build to reroute highways. Okay, takes one year to build the Empire State Building. Takes, what was that? 15 years to do the Big Dig. They want to have the first part of this done in 6 years. I don't think that's doable. I really don't.
complete, will be just 2.4 kilometers long, or about 1.5 miles. Because of the cuts to the project, contractors have begun laying off workers around the project as high-ranking members of the Saudi government have begun to scramble for ways to either salvage their ambitious Vision 2030 program or mitigate the damage that might come from falling way short of the mark. Now, just because the line is looking a lot smaller doesn't mean that the entire NEOM project has stalled. Sindala, for example, the luxury island resort that we mentioned, is expected to open its doors later this year. Elsewhere, Saudi investment of some $8 billion. All
right. Zendala. Let's... Let's see. Escape like no other. It's officially announced. Following its announcement, several are in the pipeline. Marriott has signed a deal to open 3 properties in 2024. Autograph Collection, 4 Seasons, opening in 2026. I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It doesn't say that it's open. It doesn't have a... It doesn't... Is set to start welcoming visitors in 2024. Is set. Nothing's been said yet. Nothing. There's been no ribbon cutting ceremony announced. Nothing. And you would think if like the Saudis were really proud of this and really wanted this, they would be announcing it. We would hear it on the news. I doubt it's happening.
Open its doors later this year. Elsewhere, Saudi investment of some $8 billion has resulted in the construction of vast solar and wind farms, which are intended to create, quote, green hydrogen that Saudi Arabia might start exporting as global oil sales decrease. But those successes come against a backdrop of far more concerning failures. Across the vast majority of the line, if not the entirety of the land currently being developed, the task at hand is still a matter of earthworks and foundation building. Satellite imagery from 2024 shows no structure yet formed on the land designated for the line, just some gated communities and offices for the people working on it. That imagery clearly shows the foundational work done on the designated stretch of soil, but nothing more. Elsewhere, the NEOM Bay Airport, which is operational at this time, only serves 4 airlines with connecting flights to only 6 cities, just one of which, London, is outside of the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia's finance minister, Mohammed Al-Jadaan, has recently conceded that it'll take past 2030 to even build the requisite factories and human infrastructure to build large parts of NEOM, though...
Yeah. So even they're like, no, this is impossible. Right. He's saying the infrastructure, factories, all of the stuff needed to build the city won't be ready by 2030. So this thing is going to take way longer than they expected. I think they wanted it to be open by like mid-2030s, which I don't even think is possible. Even if this thing manages to get to a place where it can be built, they're already going to be spending so much money. I'm not surprised if they say, listen, we just don't have the money for it. Like, we keep getting expenses. Things keep coming up that we're not aware of. And they're just going to shut it down, leave it as it is. There's just going to be part of the desert, which is just swept away from all the construction. Maybe the other projects will continue. That island resort seems to be a thing. They have an airport, which they could expand upon. The port may be a thing. in some capacity. I don't know if they're going to do the full octagon thing. That seems silly. Just do a regular port, because that's possible. And again, these projects are ridiculous, but they're not with I don't know what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say here is they're doable. Like, these are not in their current state, but the idea of these projects having an independent city. Well, as Adam something talked about, right? You can do all of these stuff. You can build a port. You can build a ski resort. That one's a little silly. But you can build, a sustainable, walkable city. That is entirely possible on the coast. You just build it out. You don't build a city that is contained within a small area with no room for growth, where if somebody falls on the tram lines, and you have to get to the other side, you're screwed.
Al-Jadaan, in those same statements, was careful to claim that delays on the project are a good thing in the long term. As of now, there doesn't even seem to be a plan on how Oxagon, the world's largest floating structure, is supposed to be able to, float. Unsurprisingly, Saudi officials have pushed back hard on Bloomberg's claims since they were published. Saudi Arabia's economic minister, Faisal Al-Ibrahim, has insisted that NEOM is not scaling back, saying to an interviewer named Dan Murphy with CNBC, quoting here, "All projects are moving full steam ahead. We set out to do something unprecedented, and we're doing something unprecedented, and we will deliver something that's unprecedented. For NEOM, the project, the intended scale, is continuing as planned. There is no change in scale." We'd point out, of course, that there's quite a lot of breathing room between "we will deliver something that's unprecedented" and "we will deliver a 170-kilometer long glass-encased AI city." A 1-mile version of the thing still would be unprecedented, we do agree, except it would simultaneously be unprecedented and roughly 1.4% of the vision that was initially promised. But doublespeak or not, Al-Ibrahim clearly seeks to convey the message that nothing is wrong with the NEOM project, framing any potential changes as an action to heighten their economic effects. Quoting here again, "We see feedback from the market, we see more interest from the investors, and we'll always prioritize to where we can optimize for optimal economic impact. Today, the economy in the kingdom is growing faster, but we don't want to overheat it. We don't want to deliver these projects at the cost of importing too much against our own interest." Now, we're at Mega Projects, obviously, don't want to speculate too much into the logic that might drive Saudi Arabia's ministers to insist that their project is going to hit the initial aim set out for it when failure to meet those standards appears highly likely. Perhaps they know something we don't, and they have a secret plan that involves doing foundational work until the last 3 months before their deadline and somehow making the entirety of the line pop up from the sands right afterwards, as if by magic. But more likely, Saudi Arabia is badly in need of investors, and saying anything that might reduce investor confidence now would make it all but certain that the line won't be recoverable if it continues what appears to be its current trajectory, falling way short.
They're not going to get investors because investors see this as a ridiculous thing, a ridiculous concept. They're not going to get their money back on. They see this as a doomed project. They see this as a way for the Saudi royal family to, I don't know, fill their own pockets. It seems like a corruption scandal waiting to happen. But again, who controls the money? It's the Saudi royal family. So they can do whatever they want with it, and nobody is going to tell them they can't do this. And those who do get pushback. Saw what happened with Bloomberg, CNBC. But, if somebody internally is like, "Hey, listen, this stuff's not going to work out," who knows what is going to happen to them, right? Saudi Arabia doesn't have a very good human rights record, if we're being honest.
Mohammed bin Salman had promised. So how does this happen? How do we take a project of such stunning ambition, go to all the trouble of designing it, hyping it, and continuing to add to it, and then come to the brink of ruin all in just the span of a couple of years? As it turns out, there's a range of answers that help explain just how Saudi Arabia got here, and like spears against a woolly mammoth, it wasn't just one well-placed hit that brought the whole thing down. It was a long, painful cascade of factors that, once they all stacked up together, simply could not be overcome. Perhaps the largest issues are the ones wrapped up in Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund called the Public Investment Fund, or PIF. Just this year, Saudi Arabia claimed that the PIF controls an estimated set of assets worth about $925 billion. But according to Bloomberg, the PIF's cash reserves are dipping low, with as little as $15 billion worth of cash on hand. It hasn't been that low since 2020, when Saudi Arabia began releasing data on the PIF's holdings. That's just a pittance in comparison with what...
So, again, the question is, how are they paying for this? If they only have $15 billion liquid, and this project is going to be hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars, how are they going to get that money? Right? And that sovereign wealth fund is supposed to be for other projects too. Like, these seem, it's crazy.
Mohammed bin Salman himself has said would be the total cost of just phase 1 of building NEOM, the Saudi Riyal equivalent of $320 billion. Half of the bill is expected to be covered by the PIF, which at present can cover a little under 5%. Without that money, NEOM can't be constructed. It's just that simple. At present, the PIF is working overtime to pull in investors and raise capital however they can. Bin Salman has referenced the need for external funding for years, but at present, it seems that those needs far outstrip what Saudi Arabia has been able to generate via investors outside its own government. But even there, this explanation leaves a little bit to be desired. After all, we can presume that at some point, somebody who's good at accounting inside Saudi Arabia looked at PIF, looked at NEOM, and thought that it was a good idea to greenlight the project. So, well, what went wrong between then and now? To answer that question, it's worth taking a closer look at why exactly Saudi Arabia wanted to build NEOM in the first place. Diversification. Saudi Arabia is a very, very wealthy nation, pulling incredible income to its coffers on a year-to-year basis, but for only one key reason: oil. Saudi Arabia isn't just an oil-producing nation, it is the oil-producing nation, falling only behind Russia and the United States in barrels produced per day, but way outpacing them per capita. The trouble with that is that the world is in the process of weaning itself off of oil, and even if it wasn't, oil is still a finite resource, with production expected to wane over the next few decades. Saudi Arabia has the wealth to invest in a future in which it holds reasonably steady, but if it wants to keep growing and getting richer, as all nations do, then oil just wasn't gonna do the job. That's where NEOM would come in. While NEOM is just one part of a much larger strategy, it is undoubtedly the most important piece of the overall vision. Saudi Arabia wants to expand into technology, especially clean tech, transportation and logistics, global sports and entertainment, tourism and luxury services, and entrepreneurship writ large, along with other efforts that have less to do with NEOM, including mining and petrochemical production. However, all those efforts draw on the same Saudi wealth holdings, most of all the PIF, and with so many concurrent industry overhauls, mega projects, international acquisitions and investments, and more, all happening at once, the well is starting to run dry. In an autocratic nation where all individual and collective successes and failures depend on the favor of the crown prince, it's important to propose and complete projects that can woo Mohammed bin Salman. Trouble is, bin Salman is known to have an eye for the extravagant, and Saudi Arabia can only support so many wild ideas at once. The nation's coffers are very deep, but they are not bottomless. But the numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Apparently, NEOM has also developed a workplace culture that has sent both foreign executives and expat laborers running for the hills. The problems here seem to stem from one Nadmi Al-Nasser, CEO of the NEOM project and ally of the Crown Prince. According to a wide array of sources, Al-Nasser is known to be very difficult to work with, going out of his way to scare and belittle employees, especially foreigners, after those foreigners, including high-level engineers, architects, urban planners, and other experts, were poached from Western companies to come and work on the project. Al-Nasser might not even disagree with that assessment. According to sources quoted by the Wall Street Journal, Al-Nasser gave this gem of a quote during one NEOM meeting. "I drive everybody like a slave. When they drop down dead, I celebrate. That's how I do my projects." Former executives have dinged Al-Nasser for everything from disparagement of his colleagues to demeaning them outright to engaging in and furthering discrimination within his organization. Those are problems that haven't got better with news pertaining to Saudi Arabia's broader human rights record. For example, the country's assassination of the journalist Kamal Khashoggi in 2018, which led to a number of previously involved figures deciding to give NEOM some distance. Meanwhile, reports of abysmal working conditions for labor.
Right. Another reason why investors don't want to be involved with it. Saudi Arabia has a terrible human rights record. They murdered an American citizen in a foreign country. And, that rubs people the wrong way. So it's very tough when you have this autocratic leader who likes all this extravagant stuff, but cannot pay for it. And there's no, there's no ROI in sight, which is why people don't want to be involved with it. And I don't blame them.
In Qatar during the preparations for the 2022 FIFA World Cup have led to increased concerns for the tens of thousands of laborers working across the NEOM project, although the conditions they face are currently unknown. And the people working on NEOM aren't the only ones that find themselves
They're probably exactly the same
in the crosshairs of the project's leaders. Also in the crosshairs are the Hawaitat, a large tribe of people who had a substantial population residing on their historic homeland in Saudi Arabia. Trouble is, that's also where NEOM is being built. The early reports were deeply concerning, but not necessarily unexpected. The Hawaitat were issued eviction orders as Saudi Arabia has tried to force them off their land, offering badly inadequate compensation in exchange. But then, a Hawaitat villager was killed by Saudi security forces after blowing the whistle on Saudi Arabia's actions, and several were sentenced to multi-decade prison sentences after being accused of terrorism and resistance to the forced evictions. 3 others have been sentenced to death, with those sentences being upheld by an appeals court. A panel of UN experts assesses that those prisoners are being tortured into making forced confessions in order to justify imprisoning and killing them. As of now, those evictions of over 6,000 Hawaitat from their land have yet to be remedied in any way. For their part, Saudi Arabia denies having sentenced the men to death and claims that they have connections to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Of course, these are all...
But they have connections to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. A terrible human rights record.
Deep and serious problems that can still be papered over by simply throwing money at the project. But not only is Saudi Arabia short on cash, but it's also taken a recent blow in the loss of investment from a very important partner. Just as Saudi Arabia was in the heat of its ambition in designing NEOM, it was also engaged in a process of diplomatic normalization with Israel, the nation that's long had a tense and often adversarial relationship with the Saudi kingdom. With the prospect of normalization came major interest from Israeli investors who were more than happy to help the leaders of both nations make the Middle East's 2 most formidable economies more interdependent. But since the start of the Israel-Hamas war in 2023, that normalization process has been put on hold, and with it, all the money that might have gone into NEOM from Israel is nowhere to be found. And lastly, NEOM's got to deal with the ultimate question at the heart of all planned cities. Sure, it's cool to build them, but does anybody actually want to live there? Similar to the United Arab Emirates' use of man-made islands.
Yeah, no, this is one of the ones I was gonna UAE has all of these stupid mega projects that nobody wants to live in. Right? That's the big thing. It's just like, are you going to get 9 million people who want to live in a straight line with no sunlight unless you're on the top? Like, that's another thing that they are just not thinking of. China has built replicas of Paris, and they're mostly empty. I mean, China builds a bunch of, like, huge housing projects and they lay abandoned. Turkey tried to build a whole complex of houses that they just straight up abandoned. Yeah. Dubai is making these long islands filled with huge mega mansions that are all car dependent. Stupid. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
With luxury villas, NEOM's focus on luxury vacationing is a clear attempt to attract the super rich, who may be enticed further by things like a permissive tax code and a loose legal system. Both of those, by the way, are features expected to be a part of NEOM in practice. But NEOM's focus on an AI-powered city collecting immense amounts of data from residents, including from inside their smartphones and homes, has not been taken in good faith by people who might otherwise consider living there. For a nation with the human rights record and autocratic tendencies of Saudi Arabia, letting an all-powerful AI see inside one's home and one's communications is a really big ask. The idea that NEOM would be a surveillance city that works for its residents isn't necessarily a false statement, but it's proved far less appealing than Mohammed bin Salman and his top aides might have expected. So when we zoom out for a moment and consider what might be next for NEOM, there are a few confounding factors that prevent us from establishing a clear answer. Chief among those factors is the Saudi government itself. According to NEOM's website, its press materials, statements regarding the project from Saudi decision makers and more, everything's just fine. Looking at the available data, the disclosures from available sources that are deemed reputable, and the visible progress so far, that doesn't appear to be the case. So at this critical juncture, with Saudi Arabia having poured gargantuan amounts of capital into the project already, one of two things must be true. Either Saudi Arabia has a way to dig out of this, or they don't. In the event that Mohammed bin Salman has a way out, be it a way strictly to save face or to actually get back on pace for what NEOM was supposed to be, then good for Saudi Arabia. Perhaps the answer will come in the form of a new source of investment, a cash infusion for the PIF from elsewhere in Saudi Arabia, or leveraging assets within the PIF that are currently tied up elsewhere. Right now, the PIF holds ownership shares in a wide variety of ventures, from London's Heathrow Airport to the video game companies Electronic Arts and Activision Blizzard, to Boeing, to Disney, to BP, to the Newcastle United football team. How important those assets are to Saudi Arabia, only the Crown Prince can say. But if the nation intends to go all or nothing on NEOM, there's plenty to sacrifice in order to make that happen. The other possibility is that Saudi Arabia doesn't have a plan to make this work. Perhaps they're hoping that they'll find a silver bullet to address the myriad problems they face. Perhaps they're running out the clock for as long as possible before taking a global black eye on the scale that, now that we think about it, certainly fits the concept of doing something unprecedented and then getting delivered something unprecedented in return. It's impossible to quantify just how much money NEOM has already guzzled into the deep, dark hole of losses that cannot be recouped. But unless this whole thing is some massive fraud or a money laundering scam, which it doesn't overtly appear to be, it's almost certainly consumed a hell of a lot of cash. How Saudi Arabia comes back from such a devastating blunder, how it manages to diversify its holdings with the NEOM project dead in the water, and how the people responsible manage to keep their heads from rolling, we'll just have to wait to find out. Until then, NEOM will remain among the strangest megaprojects on the planet, an uncanny amalgamation of grand ambition, autocratic ruthlessness, boundless human hope, and the bitter realities that have long been a part of Saudi Arabia's place on the global stage. If it ever does rise out of the desert sands to become even one half of what the kingdom has promised, then it'll be every bit a new world wonder. But the idea that NEOM will ever truly get off the ground appears to be less and less likely every single day.
Yeah, so there's that. All right. So let's move on to the second part of our discussion of Middle Eastern mega projects. This is probably going to be the last part. Probably not going to get to Dubai stuff or Saudi Arabia is also building a 2-kilometer tall skyscraper, which is a video that just came out by Mega Projects, which is something that I'll be interested in looking into. But yeah, so this is kind of what I wanted to do with this, with the Dcpc. Just do some topics and stuff that I'm interested in. I mean, there's like so many that I want to cover. Like I want to do something mass transit, comparing it to like the U.S. and Europe and Asia. There's actually a good video that came out pretty recently where somebody was comparing traveling by Amtrak from like New York to Philly and then just traveling in China because China has such a robust high-speed rail system and we don't have any. There is no high-speed rail in the U.S. There's France, Japan, China. There could be others that also have high-speed rail. But throughout Europe, they have such a robust mass transit system, and they're so heavily subsidized that it's a no-brainer to use a train. Now, I took an Amtrak from Western Mass to New York City. Now, it's a 3-hour. It's about like 3 hours, 30 minutes to drive there. It's about 4 hours by train normally. Now, it happened to be over the summer because they were doing construction on the lines, as well as the heat. It took a while for me to get there. There was only, from the station I was at, there were only 2 trains that ran that day. And they didn't even run to Penn Station. They ran to New Haven, Connecticut, and then I had to take another train. Normally, it would just be a straight shot. I wouldn't have to stop. So getting there, it took maybe like 6 hours. Getting back was even worse. I didn't get home until maybe like 12 hours after I had left. I may be exaggerating, but it felt like such a long time. And it was, granted, I would rather do it than drive in New York City any day of the week. But it's just so inconvenient when it should be something that is so convenient. Anyways. Let's talk about Cairo's new administrative capital, the NAC. They don't have a name for it yet. It was announced in 2015. They got most of their financing, albeit through a fund controlled by the military. Construction, some parts of the project began in 2018, some a little later. Total planned area is 714 kilometers squared, or 7,808 football fields. They're planning an administrative district, which includes new capital, a new Ministry of Defense building. They also have an airport. They want to build an Olympic city, which has, Olympic size amenities as well as amenities for a football stadium, for a soccer stadium, so that they can host FIFA. They're trying to make it seem like Egypt could be the place where you could host the Olympics, where you could host FIFA World Cup. They also want parks. They want parks, residential districts for those people who work in this administrative capital, as well as a central business district, including the tallest skyscraper in Africa. The cost of it is unknown. We don't know the numbers, but we know billions have been put into this project, and it's estimated it's going to cost $100 million just to move the capital. This complex is about, I think, 45 kilometers away from Cairo itself. They're just building it out in the middle of the desert. Yeah. So Egypt is, I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe they're under a military dictatorship. Yeah, Abdul Fattah el-Sisi has been the president since 2014. There was, the Egyptian Revolution, 2011. They elected Morsi. Sisi was the Minister of Defense in 2012, and then he became involved in overthrowing the president in 2013, and yeah, so he's been ruling it ever since. So this is a new project by the government to create a new capital. It's expensive, unnecessary, and it just seems like a money laundering scheme. But anyways, let's so I have a couple videos on it. One's kind of long. I'll just do the Adam something video since his is pretty good, short and concise. All right, and the subtitles should be in English. It's weird that he has Arab subtitles. Anyways.
Hi, and welcome to the Big Epic Engineering channel, where we look at very big buildings. Today's subject is Egypt's new administrative capital, a futuristic metropolis built from scratch by the Egyptian government. We've all heard of big mega projects before, but what makes this one truly stand out is its sheer bigness. So what does this big epic project entail? The Middle East's biggest mega cathedral, 2 big mega mosques, one of them Egypt's biggest, the world's biggest skyscraper, and 2 dozen more, the Capitol Park, twice as big as Central Park, to promote social interactions. There's also the world's biggest military headquarters, aka the Octagon, a whole new district for all the Egyptian ministries.
They all like octagons, because I think they wanted to make a pentagon, but it's bigger. Pentagon only has 5 sides. We have 8.
Smaller district with all the important institutions, a big area called People's Square with the world's biggest flagpole and 2 theaters, and a big 20-lane road for military parades, plus a monument as big as a whole neighborhood, 2 new parliament buildings, a big new presidential palace, the biggest automated monorail system in the world, and, to top it all off, an American-style suburb. So this is Egypt's new administrative capital in a nutshell. Wait, what's that? This project is pointless at best and incredibly harmful at worst? But But it's big. What?
Yeah, the residential district is going to be an American-style suburb. You can already tell they're off to a bad start.
Sheer size and scope of a project alone does not make it good. But big buildings. Look at how big they are. Bigly big. They're so big. Huh? Oh no, what is this? Oh no. So much for algorithm-generated urbanism content. Looks like we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way after all. So Egypt's new administrative capital. It is a truly enormous undertaking by the Egyptian government, its scale only surpassed by its sheer stupidity. When discussing this project, we have to ask ourselves, what is wrong with a dictator building a colossal vanity project in the desert from scratch in a country where the minimum wage is $127 per month? Let's find out. The new administrative capital was already a dumb idea, but with a few bold steps they've managed to reach unprecedented levels of idiocy, where, in my opinion, they have managed to surpass even Dubai. I'm not exaggerating. Like the saying goes, smooth-brained dictator plus construction project equals dumb shit. And oh boy, do we have some of that here, courtesy of Desert Ceausescu. As the name shows, the project itself is meant to create an all-new administrative center for the Egyptian government, moving them out of central Cairo. This isn't the first of such projects. The new administrative capital is right next to New Cairo City, built by the previous dictator, which is a 500 square kilometer gentrified car-centric urban hellscape. So Egypt's current dictator, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, took a look at New Cairo City and thought, yeah, we can build something bigger than that, and so the new administrative capital was born. So let's go over the major parts of this project to explain why exactly they're stupid, or in this case, outright evil. First, the obvious stuff. Both the world's tallest flagpole and the world's tallest skyscraper, because fuck it, why not? The flagpole is of course nothing more than nationalistic dick-waving. As for the skyscraper, if you've been watching my content before, you know why it's a bad idea, especially in the desert. To reiterate, there's just no good reason to build skyscrapers. The higher you build, the more engineering problems you have to solve, and the more expensive things get. Even if you're after the largest possible floor space, you're still better off with mid-rises. In my video about skyscrapers, I've illustrated how the Burj Khalifa, the world's current tallest skyscraper, could be outdone in terms of floor space by building 5 mid-rise commie blocks on its footprint. Otherwise, skyscrapers waste a ton of energy by virtue of being giant hunks of glass and steel. Their price per square meter is significantly higher than mid-rises, and they alienate people by complicating access to public spaces such as parks and so on. Now, there are some edge cases where you have no choice but to build skyscrapers on very small footprints and very close to each other because you simply have no available space. But, as you can see, for the new administrative capital, space isn't really an issue by virtue of it being out in the open desert. So why does Egypt want to build the world's tallest skyscraper plus 2 dozen more? The same reason as the flagpole, i.e. as part of the international dictators dick-waving contest. Dictators really do love building big dumb things for no reason. Germania is a good example, which was Hitler's renewal plan for Berlin that was mostly about redoing the city center with overly large buildings. One of them was a triumphal arch seen in the middle, which was supposed to be so large the Paris Arc de Triomphe would have fit under it. Hitler also envisioned a square, the Grand Plaza, which was supposed to be 350,000 square meters. Here it is overlaid on inner city Prague. Today's dictators prefer skyscrapers though, because that's what's trendy nowadays. Hence the new administrative capital containing 2 dozen of them, one of which is to be the world's tallest as mentioned. Between those skyscrapers and what appears to be 2 10-lane urban freeways lies the Capitol Park, now called the Green River Park, the purpose of which is
providing shade and encouraging social activities.
Great! I love it when my parks provide shade and encourage social activities. Corporate bullet points aside, the real purpose of this park is to be 6 times the size of Central Park. That's it. And considering you're creating a 2,509 hectare lawn in the middle of the desert, the water consumption of this thing will be beyond belief, which I'm sure will do wonders for stability in the region. Ethiopia's casus belli for launching a water war will be Egyptians watering their lawn. However, skyscrapers, flagpoles, and disturbingly large parks are the least of our worries here, if you can believe that. Let's take a look at the residential areas envisioned in the project. In terms of urbanism, they're complete bonkers. The most obvious problem is that most areas are completely car-centric. That means blocks of residential buildings divided by large roads and 6 to 8 lane arterial roads with minimal to no public transit.
Yeah, so you're going to have to build huge parking lots. You're just going to create so much urban sprawl that, like, in order to build these mega projects, first of all, are you going to have enough people on these roads? It just seems unnecessary. Well, also, building extra lanes doesn't make traffic easier. In fact, it'll actually make traffic worse. The more lanes you add, the more traffic, the more cars that can be put on the road. People see, oh, there's another lane. That means things should move quickly. But like everybody is thinking that, so they all drive. And it just creates the same problem. You're going to have traffic no matter what. So you're going to have parking lots for all these cars. You're going to have gas stations. You're going to have all of this infrastructure on the road. And it's just so inefficient and so dystopian.
The worst offender might be La Vista City here, which is an American-style suburb in the desert next to a freeway bordered by an arterial road. Now, there are plenty of videos out there detailing why American suburbs are the worst thing you can build. For now, let's just say they isolate people socially, force you to be car-dependent, services and amenities are far away, it's near impossible to have good public transit due to low density, it's much more expensive to drag out utilities to each house, and so on. Long story short, American suburbs are an urbanism nightmare. Back to Egypt, there's the R5 residential.
And that may be something that I want to cover on another episode. Is just it is. Want to talk about America's dependence on cars, and how they created the suburbs and all of that.
A district with fake French architecture. You know how primitive oligarchs and their children love ultra-expensive French luxury goods? The R5 is basically that, just on a whole other level. By the way, in the new administrative capital, the only meaningful public transit will be a high-speed rail line, and that's good, but they're also building a monorail line because, of course, they are. This one will cost $4.5 billion. But you already have the metro, it's right there, why not just extend that? Why create a whole new system which has significantly lower capacity than a metro line? This whole new standalone rich people's transportation neatly separated from public transit for the poors. What a strange coincidence, huh? Aside from the monorail, the whole new administrative capital is of course completely car-centric. Here we have a render of the R3 residential area, which looks like something a 6-year-old would build in SimCity 3000 with the money cheat on. It's all urban freeways. After all, public transit is for the unwashed masses, not the elite. Yes, if you thought all this was being built for the ordinary Egyptian, then I got some prime real estate to sell you out in the Sahara. According to this Reuters article, some 22 million Egyptians live in slums to this day, which is a quarter of the country's entire population. Is anything being done to better their situation? In 4 years, the government managed to relocate 750,000 people from slums to social housing. At this rate, assuming the slums population won't grow, clearing all of them will take 117 years. Well, to be fair, the Egyptian government has more important things to spend on. The world's tallest flagpole isn't gonna build itself. Also, low-income families from slums are often relocated into car-centric areas, which severely restrict their mobility. These areas are also heavily segregated from higher-income neighborhoods and risk becoming slums all over again. The issue here is of course the Egyptian government's socio-economic priorities, best illustrated by this picture of an urban freeway being built in Cairo, approximately 1 meter away from people's windows. Otherwise, a very telling example is the fate of the so-called Maspero Triangle, which is a slum area not far from Tahrir Square in central Cairo, home to some 18,000 people. In the 90s, under the previous dictator, the authorities forbade doing any repair work on the houses under threat of heavy fines. Soon enough, buildings started collapsing, often with their inhabitants inside. Thus, forced evictions began due to quote-unquote unsafe conditions. This didn't really stop until the 2011 Egyptian Revolution, where the Maspero slum became a hotbed for revolutionaries, providing essential support for those protesting on Tahrir Square. In the end, Egypt of course ended up with a different dictator who decided to finish the job and had the entire area bulldozed. 18,000 people were forcibly evicted so that a gentrified high-rise area can be built there. Hashtag gas the poor. And the new administration.
And then, where did they go? This is what happened. So, like, you're seeing this across, I mean, the world, really, but especially in the Middle East, North Africa. You know, you have these dictators who want to build these eccentric mega projects on top of already existing infrastructure. They don't want to improve the lives of the people who live there. They just rather bulldoze over them, build new stuff. Then where these people are supposed to go? They're going to live on the street. They're going to go to other slums. They're going to go to social housing, which is, because it's car dependent, is going to turn into a slum. So they're going to have the problem all over again. So what's the solution? Is it affordable social housing and a robust public transportation system? Or is it, let's bulldoze the slum to build mega mansions? I think it's the latter.
Capital is not much different in terms of social value. All this is being built not for the ordinary person, but for the ruling class and their allies. It is, in large part, meant to solidify the dictatorship by insulating the leadership from common people. It's significantly harder to overthrow your government when the parliament is 12 hours away on foot in the desert and you have to break through 20 military checkpoints to get there. The other half of the story is, of course, money. Within the company responsible for the project, the military happens to be a majority shareholder. That company is also responsible for selling and operating all that ultra-expensive property left empty by moving the government to the district they're building. The Egyptian military really is a state within a state. The dictatorship, thus the country, is held together by them. They are the true Egyptian ruling class. The ultimate symbol of this is the most ludicrous element of the project, the octagon. The octagon is the Egyptian military's new headquarters. In terms of military power, Egypt is on par with Italy, but apparently they need an HQ 8 times the size of the Pentagon, which makes it, you guessed it, the largest in the world. But the octagon is more than just a military headquarters. Around this abomination there are housing complexes, public services, amenities, and so on, making the octagon a city within a city. And this is deliberate, of course. What we have here is a brand new castle for the Egyptian military ruling class. So in the new administrative capital, we have district for the Egyptian upper class, the political class, a castle for the military ruling class, a whole bunch of world's largest bullshit projects, and a new palace for the dictator, all neatly separated from the riffraff. Meanwhile, Cairo's problems are numerous and severe. Aside from the aforementioned slums and general poverty, urban planning in Cairo is either non-existent or beyond insane. According to TomTom, it is the 30th most congested city on the planet. No wonder. Traffic management as a concept doesn't exist in Cairo. Traffic rules are a suggestion and nobody will check compliance. Crossing the road as a pedestrian is an incredibly risky maneuver, and not looking around beforehand is practically suicide. Also, did you know that Cairo, the 7th largest metro area on the planet, barely operates any traffic lights? Vehicle safety is a foreign concept. On the picture you can see an old 5-seater Soviet car packed absolutely full with children, because this is a school bus. Yep. According to the WHO, every year approximately 12,000 Egyptians die in road accidents, a number both insane and unsurprising. Meanwhile, public transit is woefully underdeveloped. For example, the Greater Cairo area of 20.9 million people is currently served by 2.5 metro lines. In contrast, the Paris metro area of 15 million people is served by 16 metro lines and 5 major suburban rail lines. There are some tram lines in Cairo, but the ones in the center were demolished long ago, and what remains is more of a rolling museum than a transit system. Beyond these, there's a municipal bus system that exists, and below that, the most crucial part of Cairo's public transit, minibuses. The website Discover Discomfort in their article described them like so. Riding a microbus takes practice. It's hard to get the right one, as you have to master certain hand signals and codes to be able to discern which to get. E.g., a fist takes us to our neighborhood, Dokki. It's hard to sit in the right place in a microbus, judging where isn't too close to the front so you're in everyone's way, and where isn't too deep so everyone is in yours. And it's hard to get off, knowing what to yell and when, and diving off in the 10 seconds you have to make it happen. As you can see, this is not a serious public transit system, more like a half-baked, haphazard mess that kinda sorta functions because it has to, just like the city of Cairo as a whole. And the leadership does not care. Instead, they're spending money on the aforementioned monorail between the new administrative capital and East Cairo, costing $4.5 billion. Imagine what could have been done inside Cairo for that kind of money. But instead, they opted for a shiny gadget bomb bullshit project because spending money on Cairo would serve the poor, while the monorail will serve the upper classes. Other parts of this project are just further insult to injury. The Unknown Soldier Monument is just a handout to military-adjacent real estate companies. Also got all of the giant Aang symbols all around. It's about as subtle as the character design in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And here I'd like to take a brief aside and voice my overall disappointment with quote-unquote urbanism content on YouTube. I hate how many content creators almost never examine any project beyond look how big it is. It is my belief that urbanism-related content should be more than just bamboozling people with big numbers and CGI. You should look at whom the project is built for, how it affects people, i.e. its socioeconomic costs and benefits. In lieu of that, you're just jangling keys in front of a bunch of babies, and also get 100 million views in the process. In general, if you can replace your audio with a Donald Trump level self-aggrandizing bullshit speech with stock music and not lose much of the information value, you might want to rethink your video. Look, I know skyscrapers, I love skyscrapers, many of my best friends are skyscrapers, this is the best skyscraper ever constructed, ever, billions and billions of square feet, most tall in the world, bigly built, big business activities, very big business, At the end of the day, urbanism is more than just building some big, shiny buildings. It's the built environment we humans are meant to inhabit. A building on its own is just a heap of bricks, metal and concrete. Its intended purpose, the kind of people it will serve, its location, accessibility, those are what make a building worth talking about. But very often these quote-unquote urbanism channels only focus on the physical object and some easily marketable numbers, nothing more. Sure, the new administrative capital looks impressive, lots of big buildings, big buildings, but that alone tells us nothing about what it really is. A dictator's bullshit vanity project at the expense of tens of millions who are forced to live in poverty for decades to come. But it didn't have to be this way. Egyptian authorities could have put their traffic management in order, create a workable municipal bus system, build new metro lines, more affordable housing, and they could have improved Cairo's chaotic urban planning. Instead, they chose to build a $40 billion monument to hubris and sociopathy, brainlessly celebrated by people who ought to know better. Welcome to Egypt's new administrative capital, where buildings are big and brains are smooth. Following my desert megaproject tradition, I'll leave you with a poem. This one is titled Ozymandias by Percy B. Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
Yep. Yeah, so they're all just big old vanity projects so that dictators can feel big. Meanwhile, they are ignoring all of the socioeconomic issues that will probably bring about another revolution. I have no doubt that there'll be another Arab Spring in the next 20, 30 years. Maybe they might fall in the same things, but it'll be revolution nonetheless. All right. I think that's going to do it for tonight. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'll try to do this, once a week. Maybe more. I won't be doing it next Tuesday, but I'll try to do it sometime next week. Not sure when. I'll figure out a day. And yeah, so thanks everybody for watching. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.